as much as you and I and others understand, have been red pilled and can see that there's a chance that we could turn it around, and I hope I'm wrong from here, but I don't think so. I think we're going to have to go through that rougher period that's in front of us. That's my estimation. Work through that, get to that point where, look, enough is enough. We've had it. We've lost everything. And it doesn't mean lost everything physically. You lost your house, your car, and your job. I'm not referring to that. I'm talking about we lost the spiritual basis of what's right and wrong, and letting people get away with too much criminal activity where enough is enough. Put me in jail. When you started this country, it was men that gave up their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for freedom.
Watching Capital Cause, and my name is Danny, and today's guest is David Morgan. David, thank you for coming back on the show.
It's always good to be with you, Danny. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Let's just kick it right off, David. What is top of mind for you as it relates to the economy, the world, the news, etc.? What is occupying your headspace right now?
Well, since it's election day, I really can't get that out of my head because there's a lot of angst out there. There's a lot of victimhood. Shoulda, coulda, might have. If things had done this, and a lot of people, unfortunately, look at the political class with expectations that are beyond realistic. I mean, really, if you look at the hierarchy of how the world works, and I've done this many times, it's basically a page out of the Thrive movie, Thrive 1, and they do a pyramid structure. And at the bottom of the pyramid is us, all living things, animals, plants, people, just a general population on a global basis. And then the next step of the first real level of the Great Pyramid is the political class. But a lot of people have given the impression that the politicians really are very, very powerful. And the most powerful person in the world is the president of the United States and all this stuff, which is absolutely it's not true. The next level up on the pyramid is the corporate structure. And that is your multinationals, globalists. These are corporations that are global, worldwide, and they have a lot of sway with lots of different governments and lobbyists, and they basically buy politicians. And that's the next level up in power. And the next level up from there, of course, starts the banking system. And you get your commercial banks, and on it goes, because you need funding to get credit to start a corporation, especially a large corporation is going to borrow, use credit very, very often as the company grows and grows and grows. So that's the real structure. But unfortunately, most people don't realize that, and they buy into the idea that if their team wins or their person gets in or whatever. So that's just on my mind. I would like to, turn that upside down, so to speak, and make more people aware of how the system actually works, and that these politicians, for the most part, are bought and paid for. I mean, there's a renegade maverick here and there. You've got, Ron Paul, is no longer in Congress, but, one time. And even him, and I'll give him all the credit he deserves. I mean, I really believe in the man, but even him, he is human. There's been times when, in my estimation, he needed to compromise, not fully his values. I think to me, he stuck to his core principles better than anybody I've ever. I mean, I put myself in his shoes and said, would I have those principles so strong that I wouldn't waver, the whole time I was in there? And I don't know if I would. It's very tempting to say, well, you don't get this like this, but if you just compromise a little bit, we'll do this for you next time, kind of crap. So probably went off on a tangent, but I'm just kind of fired up, Danny, because it's worrisome when we depend on others to make our lives better than for ourselves to take our own self-responsibility. And one of the main principles of the founding was, he who governs least governs best, and you have self-responsibility. And with that, you got to, one, do everything you say you're going to do, and two, don't infringe on the rights or freedoms of anybody else. It's pretty simple. Those two rules are the basis of a free society, and it's not democratic. In a way it is, but it's a constitutional republic, which means equal treatment under the law. So if I steal a car, I get the same punishment that if a politician steals a car, but we all know that if you got a lot of money these days, you probably can get off of the crime or get it lessened or get postponed or whatever. So again, I'm still on a rant, but I really am fired up about what the big picture is. And the bigger picture is beyond politics, but we can't seem to get unstuck from that. Let me ask you, turn it around. What do you think? You think I'm blowing hot air, or you think I'm making sense?
No, I think you're making perfect sense as it relates to the picture. The picture here in America and in the West as a whole, it is extremely murky. When you look at China, for example, you can point your finger to the CCP as a center of power. When you go to Russia, for example, you can point your finger to the Kremlin as a center of power. In the West, it's a lot more complex because we do have this veneer of a republic, of a democratic republic. So we don't have overt rulers like those countries do as autocracies. Ours is a little bit more nuanced and it requires a little bit more investigation, let's say. You can't take it at face value. Whereas in other parts of the world, you can take it at face value. And when people try to apply that face value here, it becomes a naive viewpoint. So I agree with what you're saying. I mean, the system, it is not what it seems. It's the entire premise of like being red pilled. Before someone gets red pilled, they see the false veneer of the world. They see the world as it's made out to seem. But when you take the red pill, then all of a sudden you see the underbelly of everything. What actually animates the system becomes known.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the reinforcement. Yeah, it's, again, it comes back to, I think, self-responsibility. I mean, that's really the idea is self-government. I mean, you had someone that actually represented you was the idea, or your district, your county or whatever. And of course, we're so far away from that now. And, it comes with a lot of things. I mean, off record, we started the recording very early, but we were discussing slightly about the age of empire and how all these empires sooner or later cycle through. It's a cyclical process.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing unnatural. In fact, it's very natural. And we've basically outlived a democracy, which is usually around a 200-year time frame.
Yeah, we're actually in the midst of this 250-year revolutionary cycle ending, which is where we're at right now. But go ahead, continue.
No, that's it. You can add to it. I'm ready for the next question, but thanks for the feedback.
Yeah. I mean, so you do see these cycles intertwining. You have this 250-year cycle that's been well documented that we're at the tail end of right now. You have fourth turning cycles also in play that happen once every 80 years. We're at the tail end of that. We're at the tail end of the fourth turning of that cycle as well. You have unforeseen technologies like AI coming into fruition that's really muddying the waters on what could be true, what could be false, etc. You have resource wars. You have wars going on all across the world. So you do seem to have a lot of these cross currents intersecting at the exact same time, which makes it a very turbulent environment. What is your biggest concern right now, Dave, considering all that's going on?
My biggest concern is really for my, family or extended family. I mean, it's for my kids and my grandchild, What have we left them? What have we done? Why haven't we stood on principle? Why didn't we push back harder? Personally, have I done enough? I've written 3 books. I'm making a documentary. I'm doing interviews like this. A lot of it's been talk, but there's been action. I mean, I'm pretty generous with the causes I believe in, and a lot of times I don't have the time, but I can give them resources. So I send a check to people that I think are doing the right thing or, the best benefit. There's just so many things in this documentary. It's going to be my first one, maybe the last one. But there are a lot of areas I wanted to touch on that I just really didn't have time for. But, I wanted to go to some of these organic farmers like Joe, I think it's Solano or something like that.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. And, so if I asked him, what would be the number one thing to do to help the planet, he'd probably say get back to organic farming. And I think that's a valid point. I just couldn't put all that type of stuff in the movie, but there isn't like a one fix, like electing the right leader is a fix. Forget about it. There's a lot of things, and a lot of things we could do on our own. I mean, you have a choice every time you go to the store. Now, I am well aware that a lot of people can't afford to eat properly anymore, so they're buying, cheaper food, packaged food. depleted food, because that's it, which is really a shame that, that's where we have devolved to. But my point is that there's a lot of areas that we can improve upon, and there isn't just one that's going to do it. But there are principles that we can adhere to that can make it better. I mean, if you have the Clean Water Act, that's it. Clean water everywhere, always. Oh no, but if we're going to frack, that goes out the window, because for fracking, energy trumps, clean water. So in that case, there's no such thing. It reminds me of Animal Farm. I read it twice. It was required reading when I was a high schooler, I think. And, that sentence that always sticks in my mind is all animals are created equal, except some animals are more equal than others.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the Clean Water Act nationwide, except some animals are more equal than others, like the oil industry. And I'm big on energy. Anyway, I want to give it back to you, because you always inspire me as far as your youth enthusiasm and what I consider realistic. You're not overly optimistic, but you're not overly pessimistic. You're in that neutral zone, which allows an open mind, because there are solutions to these problems. There really are. But it's, how much are we going to let happen before we take action? And most action can be done in a voluntary and peaceful way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's delusional to be optimistic or pessimistic in an overt way, to a certain point, right? Realism is somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And I want to take it actually now to the economy. The markets are kind of teetering on the edge. They don't really know where they're going. It's just moving sideways, awaiting the election results. How do you see the current market, the current economy? We had this awful, dreadful jobs report that came out last week at 12,000 jobs as we head into retail season here, for Christmas and so forth. And all you get is a measly 12,000 jobs. I mean, things are not looking good. What is your assessment?
Well, I have to take a joke from Twitter. I saw somebody tweeted that 12,000 jobs isn't going to help fund Social Security into the future. Well, as you know, Danny, I've said many times that there's a very big demarcation between the markets and the economy. So the markets are way, way overvalued by any metric you want to use. You see these billionaires just dumping their stocks left, right, and center. Bezos, Buffett, all kinds of high-end money managers. They see what's coming. So stock market really should match pretty close to what the physical economy is. And the physical economy has been contracting. There are all kinds of chain restaurants, corporate restaurants that are curtailing their stores. They're taking many out of business. So even Wendy's, White Castle, that's been around from the early 1900s. I mean, there's so many of these corporate restaurants that are basically either going out of business or cutting back quite significantly. And it all ties together because the physical economy is not doing well, but the market is signaling that it's doing great, getting these new highs. Eventually, the physical economy and the markets will match or pretty close, which means you're going to see that the stock market has an evaluation that's a lot lower than it is now. Now, I've changed my thinking on this slightly over the last couple of years, that in a true hyperinflationary environment, you could see the stock market continue to go up. And is that matching the physical economy? In a way, yes, because the currency is being destroyed at such a rate. It's such a huge depreciation of the currency over a small amount of time that people are putting their money in the stock market.
It happened in Zimbabwe, right?
Yeah, it's better than getting out of it. Exactly. So I still see that as a remote possibility. I mean, the checks and balances in the system, as corrupt as it is, there is the time value of money. And because of that, the less you trust the money, the higher the interest rate needs to be in order for people to hold on to a dollar. And that means that you see it for a rate of return, but also a means of signaling to the market that you don't trust the value of this thing. I mean, So, they go hand in hand, actually. And of course, it's been suppressed because the power structure is set where they can do so many things with the huge banking system that they can do Operation Twist, buy certain securities at the long end of the curve to bring down the short end. And there's a lot of tricks and things that can be done to give the illusion that everything's okay in the debt markets or the credit markets. But really, that is the point of demarcation. That's the point. When that starts to fail significantly, game's over.
Yeah. And what about the gold and silver markets? A lot of people have claimed manipulation, at least on the part of silver. If whether or not that's the case, how much longer can you see silver at these levels, whereas while gold continues to make new all-time highs? Now, granted, on a year-to-date basis, they both have made substantial gains since the start of the year. But silver is still well below its $50 all-time high price target.
It is. I will answer the question, Danny. But first of all, manipulation. I mean, it's a real hot button for so many people. Some are very adamant it's not. Some are very adamant it is. I'm sort of in that centered zone. I mean, my take, I haven't said this in a while. I've said from the beginning, you cannot manipulate the long-term trend. Okay. So the long-term trend for both metals is up. But within that long-term trend, you certainly can manage the market. And that's done. And of course, there's been several cases that are outlaw and fines have been paid for spoofing. Is spoofing manipulation? I would say yes. But if you went to a legal eagle, you went to a legal scholar and you started to get a law case put together, you wouldn't want to use the word manipulation because it's never come in at law saying that the market was manipulated. It's a semantics game, but every word has meaning at law. So you would say, it's been spoofed. And then you talk to the guys on the floor. I mean, you talk to, people at the commodities level that are higher up and they know the game and they know the structure and they know a lot about it. And they'll say, well, that's just normal activity, I mean, these guys run stops on corn. They run stops on the oil market. They run stops all the time. It's just part of doing business. So from their point of view, it's okay to do it.
Yeah.
Last statement, I'll get to the silver question. Last statement is when Chris Marchese and I wrote the book, The Silver Manifesto, we went to the Sharpe's ratio, which is an excellent example to find out if something's in a free market format or not. It wasn't. Silver market comes right out up there with Madoff. The kind of returns you get between the New York close and the London open are so non-correlated to a random walk that it's pathetic. So is it manipulated? I'll choose my words carefully. Long term, you can't. In the short run, yes, you can.
And even if it was, David, you understand economics. The people watching the show understand economics. Manipulation creates shortages over time.
Sure. And that's kind of what you've done. Because what you've done for a long time, and I'll give my friend Steve St. Angelo credit on this, but what he's pointed out is that the price of gold and silver for a very long time, especially in modern times, hasn't been very much above the price of production. So people say, oh my gosh, $30 silver finally, it's a 12-year high. Well, first of all, it's a nominal value because the $30 today is not equal to the $30 in 2011. That's point number one. Point number two, it's pretty close to the cost of production right now. Whereas gold's cost of production right now is around 1,800. And we're at, almost $1,000 above that, $800 above that. So gold has definitely taken off into the monetary sphere, meaning that now gold is being valued as money, not as just a commodity. When it's trading at a cost of production, it's a commodity. Silver's trading as a commodity still, but it's outperformed gold this year slightly. And I think, as you alluded to, David, what's your opinion? My opinion is it can't stay there for very long. And I think that the industrial users, the Silver Users Association, that you can't really find anymore in the web, have done such an excellent job at managing the supply for their benefit. In other words, keeping it near the cost of production for so long that they can't imagine that it could break free, but it's already done that. It did that in 2011, as we know. It got this sharp, parabolic move, and then it went to about 50, not quite, and then it leveled off around the $30 level for a year and a half. And this time, I think we'll have to test 50 maybe a couple more times. It'll go through. Once we're above 50, I think it'll really continue. Could get to 100. I've always said that from the early days. So I don't think it'll be this year, Danny. I think it will be next year. And I think we're going to see something in the silver market we haven't ever seen, to my knowledge. And that is competing forces for industrial need and investment safe haven status happening at the same time. So you could see a leapfrog type of situation where somebody, maybe a small hedge fund, family office, sovereign wealth fund perhaps. I mean, Russia has announced they're going to buy silver basically for strategic purposes. Maybe another nation state will do that. So you got investment demand on top of, the Teslas, the 3Ms, the Samsungs, the Apples. I mean, you name it. Anybody in the high tech world. I mean, just the semiconductor industry uses 44 million ounces of silver. Most people don't know that. So you've got all these high tech uses that are absolutely essential to their product. How much silver is in a semiconductor? Practically nothing. But without it, you don't have it. So if you consider on aggregate, on the total, you take worldwide how many of those things are produced in a year, and you use 44 million ounces of silver, I mean, that's rather significant. So my point is that you could get in a feeding frenzy where industrial demand is X, and then investment demand is X plus 20%. And then industrial guys come, wait a minute, you know what? Our indicators are we've only got, 2 months worth of silver in the warehouse. The price is going up, and we don't want to go out of business. I want you to buy a year's supply of silver. Oh, really? Yeah, okay. And then other, industrial leaders find out that, Samsung is stockpiling silver, which used to be done. Used to be warehouses that were used. And they say, we better do the same thing. We don't want to be out of the, iPhone 22, whatever it is. So that I think could happen. I say could, not would, but there's an interesting thing about the markets, and that is where you get the FOMO. And we haven't really had a FOMO in the silver market on a global basis before. We had it in the US in the late 79, early 1980s. I was there. I was on the streets in LA. I watched it happen. But this time it won't be, big markets like LA and Chicago and New York and Dallas. It'll be, Mumbai. It'll be, Moscow. It'll be all over the place. And now whether people are literally standing in lines to buy or sell silver, I doubt it. But you will see a lot of, it could, silver's so suppressed as far as financial press that no one's ever taught on, MSNBC or, any of these news channels. Silver is a great investment. Look at how undervalued it is. Look at all these other metals, all the other metals in the world, base metals and precious, that are a higher value than they were in 1980, except for one. It's called silver. Why is that? You never get those on the mainstream channel.
Did Russia provide any additional details in terms of how much silver they were planning on stocking up for their reserve, or when they would start?
Not to my knowledge, Danny. I wish I had one really good contact in Russia that I have lost contact with. I met with a young man on a platinum deal in Russia, and I've lost his business card. He probably wouldn't have any insight, but you never know unless you ask the question. So I don't. I'm working on it. I'm straight up. I'm not going to, make something up. I am working on it. I don't have it.
Right. How do the precious metals prices work in tandem with this oil price that we've had that's been relatively subdued lately? Should we not begin to start seeing an increase in some of the gains for our mining stocks, if that were the case? If we were to have,
I'm still bullish on both the metals, the miners, and the oil industry. Even though I just wrote about it briefly in the last Morgan report. I mean, really, there's been a demand decrease after the illness in the 2020 era. I mean, there's not as much flying. A lot of people working from home. You're not seeing, see the commercial real estate's a real mess in the United States because a lot of these small, medium-sized to bigger companies say they don't come into the office. We'll do a Zoom meeting every week. And then after the illness went away, a lot of corporate entities said, you know what? We don't really need all this office space. We're going to quit leasing it. We'll let our people come in. We'll let this many work from home, and we'll have a corporate meeting at this office or whatever. So a lot of that is shifting the way people work, and that's of course putting pressure on the markets overall. So to get back to your question, I think it's still up in the air. I think there's a lot to be determined, but I do think that there is not enough attention being paid to the shifts that have actually occurred and what they mean for the future.
Hey guys, quick pause. As you know, we are big proponents of physical gold and silver on this channel. However, the conundrum often arises, where do you put it? Do you put it in an above ground safe where it becomes a target for burglars, intruders, etc.? Or do you bury it underground? This is where Dirty Man Safe comes in. This is a very simplified solution if you want to bury your gold or silver or actually any valuables underground, whether it be alternative car keys, house keys, paperwork, legal documents, anything that's important to you, you can put in this bad boy right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at how it works. All right, so you're going to start off by digging a hole underground, sticking the tubular module in with the safe inside. You bury your valuables, and then whenever you want to extract it, boom, there it is. There's a string attachment. You just pull it out, bada bing, bada boom. Check it out here. You have 3 different sizes, the girl safe, the man safe, and the old man safe, depending on how much you want to store in this thing. It's all about distribution. You want to diversify where you put your valuables. You don't want to just put them all in one place. And for more information, also click the link down below and get your 15% off discount. All right, guys, let's get back to the video. I see. What about all the rest of the commodities complex? How would those behave given a Trump administration part 2 or a Harris administration?
You're going to see a huge shift between the asset classes. You're going to see what was for the last probably 2 decades, real estate, stock market, and of course, trading within the realms of the bond market being the featured way to go. And we're going again, and this goes back and forth cyclically. You're going from paper assets to real assets. So the shift will be to commodities. And of course, we all need food. So you're going to see more and more pressure on certain foodstuffs, even the softs like cocoa, coffee, and cotton. You're going to see almost anything that's on the commodity board that's not a financial thing like T-bills and T-bonds and futures in those assets or the foreign exchange markets. But anything that's a soft, an ag, metals, base metals, things along those lines will be higher and higher. They're the really undervalued aspect of the marketplace, and they're also the most needed. I mean, you can get by without a new iPhone, but you can't get by without, bread or, food of some type. So that's the place to be. I know Jimmy Rogers is probably one of the best as far as talking about that and why, the commodity sector is something that you got to look at the right time. So we're at the right time, place, and condition right now if you're ahead of the curve, to look outside of the stock market, outside of the real estate market, start looking at commodities market, which doesn't mean you need to be in the futures market. You can look at equities that, first of all, they're ETFs that are stocks that respond as a commodity, in a given commodity sector. You also have a lot of, corporate entities. I mean, these are real things. You look at a cotton textile producer, you look at an ADM, you look at, huge conglomerates for, potatoes or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different companies out there that work in the food industry or work in the textile industry or work in manufacturing or whatever. But that's the shift from things we want to things we need. I was looking at something that's a little off topic, bringing me back in, but I have to say it. I was thinking about upgrading my truck. My truck's been well maintained, but it's pretty old. And watched a guy on YouTube this morning before I got my first cup of coffee. He's talking about these Ram trucks at, $72,000. It wasn't even a 4-place cab. It was like a cab and a half. It was a 2-wheel drive, and it was a year old. $72,000. My dad bought a house in Silicon Valley when I was an eighth grader on a creek, brand new for $35,000, and that was in Silicon Valley. They could have
Yeah, well,
bought two
what's
houses.
happening with these trucks is that these CAFE standards, I believe they're called. They have something to do with the carbon emissions as it relates to the shell of the truck. So if you want to onboard a V6 or V8 engine, it's got to be a certain size shell. So you can't have these small work trucks like you did before, right? Like remember back in the 80s and 90s, like these small work trucks with like a V4 engine or V6 engine. Well, you can't have that anymore. You've got to actually upgrade the shell. That's why I have like these huge Toyota Tundras now with a V6. You have these huge F-150s. They've got to be so huge in order to be able to be eligible to have a V8 to begin with.
Yeah. Crazy times.
So I want to take it back to the to the various cycles that we've kind of alluded to at the beginning of the podcast. You did mention that there is this need to get back to our roots as Americans, in terms of limited government, to self-govern to self-govern the people and so forth. The question is, with all of these wars, all of this conflict, all of this turmoil, could that really happen though? It seems like during times like this is when you have more authoritarianism, more power consolidated within the state. Is liberty something that can occur within the context of war and conflict and fourth turnings and things like that?
Yes and no. The best answer, and I've thought about this a great deal, doesn't make me right, but reading the fourth turning and thinking about the end of empires and the collapse of complex societies and some of the work that I've read, some of the lectures I've listened to, is we have to hit bottom. There's no way out, to my knowledge, that you can't go through the process. And the process means you've got to get to a certain level where you must achieve that level before things turn around. It's kind of like throwing a tennis ball in the air. It'll keep going with the amount of force that you gave it. Then it reaches neutrality where it basically pauses at rest for a millisecond or three, and then it starts to come down, and it can't stop halfway down. It's got to hit the ground. And that's the metaphor I would use, that we have to hit bottom. I did an interview with a gentleman in Canada that was really getting attacked during the illness, and he stood his rights. You may be familiar with it. I can't say his name correctly, Pulowski, something like that. He's Polish, great man. And I did my interview with him. It's on my blog, by the way. I asked him that question, well, when in Poland did the people get solidarity and band together and say enough is enough and turn this thing around? And I expected an answer. Shouldn't have had any expectations, should have stayed neutral. But I expected, it got this far down and the people had it. And he said, no. They didn't turn it around until they'd lost everything.
Yeah.
When they had lost everything, that is when they band together and started to turn things around. So that's my answer to you. And I looked at it. I believed him. He's a very truthful man, and it hurt to feel that. But also, trust but verify kind of thing. And I verified, yeah. So that's my answer, Danny. Unfortunately, as much as you and I and others understand and been red-pilled and could see that there's a chance that we could turn it around, and I hope I'm wrong from here, but I don't think so. I think we're going to have to go through that rougher period that's in front of us. That's my estimation. Work through that, get to that point where, look, enough is enough. We've had it. We've lost everything. And it doesn't mean lost everything physically. You lost your house, your car, and your job. I'm not referring to that. I'm talking about we lost the spiritual basis of what's right and wrong, and letting people get away with too much criminal activity where enough is enough. Put me in jail. When you started this country, it was men that gave up their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for freedom. In other words, they would pay any price, including their lives, for it. People forget that. The old adage, freedom isn't free. Well, that's true, but they don't realize, in a way, maybe veterans do. I mean, I don't want to get too much on a tangent, but the idea being there's nothing more priceless than that. And yet we've lived in this, less and less freedom that's slowly been eroded over the last several years. And especially it accelerates, where there's free speech, all animals are equal, except your speech isn't equal to our speech. So therefore, we're a private corporation and we have the right to censor you because we're private. You can't say that on our platform. So you know how it's gone. I mean, your audience knows how it's gone. But this is just, I'm maybe too long-winded, Danny, but it really upsets me. I really wish there was a way to say now, and here's what we do, and let's band together and let's get this thing going. Unfortunately, I very strongly the belief that we got to go further down.
So there was this longitudinal poll that was conducted over decades where they tracked what Americans valued the most. And for the better part of the last 50 years, it was always something like religion, patriotism, family, not in that order, but that combination of things. What's interesting is that within the last 10 years, primarily the last 4 years, the number one value on Americans' mind is money. It's overtaken family, it's overtaken religion, it's overtaken patriotism. And so it's really interesting because who controls all the money controls the value of the people. So if I have all the money, I am the central bank, or I'm the elites, or whoever I am, and the people of this country, this society, they all value money the most, then I have de facto control over them.
Yeah, well, that's what my documentary is all about, in essence, Danny. You put your nail, hit the nail on the head. I mean, basically, not only is money power, but it has power over the people. And then the way I look at it, and I get others' opinions in the documentary, but really, if you analyze a little deeper, or at least the way I look at it is, well, what does money represent to people? And what it represents is security. It represents, it used to be financial freedom. I mean, when I was your age, I thought about financial freedom. I didn't think about money other than a tool, but if I had enough of it, I didn't have to work for the man. I could work for myself, or I could start a foundation, or I could vacation all year long, or I could do whatever I wanted. But now that financial freedom is a little bit of a misnomer, because you could be quote unquote financially free, but you're not within the boundaries of the CCP social credit score. And so it doesn't matter how much money you have, unless you conform to Big Brother, you're not really allowed to be free. So money isn't a choice of freedom, but it represents security for most people. So that, even though in some cases it's greed. I mean, you look at some of the cryptocurrency and some of the Bitcoin maxis and things that's, they never get enough of what they don't need, because security comes from my worldview from within, really. I mean, if you're not self-reliant, self-satisfied, working on your own personal being to be as good a human being as you can be, and also to produce that aura, that spirituality, that attitude toward others, then what the heck are you doing on the planet? But I'm off on a tangent. The point is that we are in a situation that's heavily distorted, and money won't solve the problem. Let's say, I love putting up that little image I have. I put on my Twitter about once a month with the guy holding up the cardboard sign saying "starving billionaire." I mean, if there are times when all that money doesn't really mean very much. And that's what people may have to go to the bottom to get that lesson. Let's just, as a thought experiment, say the dollar does hyperinflate. So now you got 10 million in your bank account. It doesn't buy you anything. Have to shoot off on one more tangent, but I took one of these $100 trillion bills.
Imagine being Warren Buffett. Imagine being Warren Buffett. Wouldn't you trade all the money that you had for 50 more years, for 50 years of youth, for example?
Right. No, time is our most valuable asset, and there's a lot to it, but that's kind of what I tried to get into the documentary, that we've got to get over the fear and control of money. If you're more self-reliant or more self-assured, that even though the future's unknown, that you can, get a job or make your own work or whatever. And you don't have to be as reliant on others, and of course, again, it really means, to me, most cases, it's security. I want to be secure in this very unstable, unknown, challenging world, especially during these most challenging times. these, fourth turnings where I know food prices are getting out of hand. I know there's less choices than there used to be. My favorite fast food restaurant's been closed down. I never thought that would happen. All these things that are taking place puts fear into people. And the way they overcome that is by something outside of themselves, which is a pile of these green pieces of paper, versus looking within and saying, well, what can I do? Oh, yeah, I can grow my own tomatoes, or I can work with my neighbor, or I can get the neighbors together and start a community, farm or a community, I forget what they call them, but they're in the cities. I mean, so people are very, very cooperative, especially during tough times. And this is what we will get to at the bottom, and you'll see it along the way. I mean, there's early adopters that are doing that now, but it won't be pervasive. It won't be throughout the whole entire city and every big city in the country. But at some point that could happen as an analogy or a metaphor for how people will come together and say enough is enough. We don't trust the food supply. We don't want to pay their prices. We could grow our own. We all work together. Everybody works 2 hours. I mean, when you get the community working in one of these, 1 acre farms or something, or, sometimes they're that small or half an acre, it's amazing what you can grow there. And if the community chips in, it's not like working your butt off. Everybody puts in an hour or two every weekend kind of thing, or through the week, and you could still grow a lot without really putting a huge demand on you. And in a way, it's sunshine, grounding, and fun. So there's just a lot of things that I think the Mother Nature is going to put back into our heads and our hearts as we hit this bottoming process that I keep talking about. I don't know the outcome, Danny. I mean, there'll be some places that won't be that affected. I mean, the Amish, they're probably going to take a ho-hum to the whole thing, or for the most part, but they're already very, very self-reliant. But people that live in a penthouse somewhere that have a lot of money, that money may not work in the way that they want it to, or it may not be available. I've used this, many times. You could have a gold Krugerrand. Let's talk about real money. And you want to buy, you want a Wendy's hamburger, but there are no Wendy's left anymore. So you can't use that Krug for what you want. It's just the thing you want doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, Dave, it's been I think we've covered a whole host of things. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I think just going back to you, I mean, youth and staying neutral and not worrying too much about the future. Do what you can. Don't let your imagination run wild, and know that, staying grounded, and know that we've done this before. We, humanity, have been through probably worse depressions than the one we're going to face. I don't know that for a fact, but we've gone through a lot and we've come through. So the idea that, you got to shelter in place and hide or whatever, you got to just take it a day at a time and know that we come out the other side. And we usually come out the other side better for it. It might not feel better for it on a physical material basis. I have more stuff, but you might have a much bigger heart, a much stronger head, and much more self-reliance and self-responsibility, and a feeling of true being. I mean, powerful being that we all are, because you've gone through this and you've been hardened in a good way, not hardened heart-wise, more open heart, but hardened from the superfluous bullshit that we've been advertised on for most of our lives has its rightful place as meaningless junk that serves no purpose in our lives. And we get back to purpose as humanity. How's that for an end?
Yeah, I mean, life is as easy as it's ever been throughout history right now. And despite that, you have the highest rates of neuroticism, anxiety, mental health issues, all that kind of stuff. And it harkens back to what you're saying. You do need some sort of adversity in your life to kind of avoid atrophying.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Dave. Where can people find you?
Yeah, the best place is on my main website, themorganreport.com. From there, there's a bunch of icons at the top that go directly to the YouTube channel, the LinkedIn channel, Facebook, whatever else I've got going on. Twitter is the one that I'm most active on during the week. And then there's a blog tab for free, and there's an About Us tab, and the About Us is got the Four Horsemen film, the documentary, that's free. You can just click it and watch it right on your computer.
All right. We'll have the links to that all down below. So be sure to check them out, guys, if you're interested. Also, if you like this video, right? Go, David, go in the comment section. If you disagreed with anything we had to say, let me know what it was. I do read the comments. So really interested to get your take here, guys. And finally, subscribe to the channel if you're getting value out of this content so I can keep getting more guests and can keep doing this for a lot longer. And check out our Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com. Link to that is down below if you want to support me even further. With all that said, thank you guys for watching. Dave, thank you for coming on, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye, y'all.